we passed through that portal. Yeah, they thought we were slaves, but we came back as immortal. Cause I ain't down our dreams, so we passed through that portal. Yeah, they thought we were slaves, but we came back as immortals.
Cause I am fucking supreme. I create what I dream. Quantum induce all the photons, so my light code is seen. Yeah, that's manifestation. Yeah, that's induced coherence. Plus the light interference produces life when you hear it. Yeah, that's word the result. I'm seeing dimensions and circles, moving the light through the portal. Who knew this life was immortal? Don't let them slave you with time. DNA full of divine. There's so much weight on your spine, cause of all those crowns on your mind. Why you wanna be a king? Dog, that's 21 grams of this love. I'ma whip it all in this sauce. Yeah, no death, no birth. So I guess I'm just a walking truth. A fucking truth. But I promise it's all worth it. We empower you.
I am fucking supreme. This the return of that sovereign. Now watch me take off my skin so I can lift up the consciousness.
Yeah, they cut down our dreams, so we passed through that portal. Yeah, they thought we was
Skin so I can lift up the
We're going to try to talk a little louder tonight. We're beyond duality. Tonight we're going to be talking again about frequency warfare. Frequency warfare is a spectrum of harmful events involving light and sound. Frequency warfare attacks are any experience that negatively drain your energy or mood. Your energy and your mood are your vibe, your emotions and your mood. How you feel controls your vibe. If your mood and your vibe is low, I said that wrong. If your mood is low, your vibe is low. Anything that produces light or sound can cause a negative drain on your energy and your vibe. Where are we touching? There we go. Emotions, relationships, the cells in your body can cause death. The words we speak to each other are the strongest frequency. That's what we're doing. Misunderstanding can be a frequency. I have messed it big. Nope. Frequency, sound, and music, anything that makes noise. Deceived when you're told lies, when you don't understand things, when you're told the definition of a word and you're left with the impression that you know what it means. It's a little hard to understand. It's not easy to define what the sound of that would be. It's the sound of all the things that we don't hear correctly when something doesn't sound right. Misunderstanding causes arguments, causes mental problems. It can cause a lack of connection. It can cause riots and wars, all that. From misunderstanding someone's intention, misunderstanding someone's meaning, someone's goal.
Their tone of voice.
Oh, tone of voice, that's a big one. Misunderstanding, that would be a frequency. The tone of voice. When you sound like you're mad, but you're not. Or you're trying to sound sarcastic and funny, and someone interprets you as hateful or rude. Frequency of misunderstanding. That'd be one. So when we were learning about the Babel against God, down the tower, and sense to me, a bunch of people build the tower. They'll speak different stuff.
Words used.
There's a different. That causes misunderstandings and miscommunication, divide, isolation, thinking you're more or less than someone else because of the language used or the words that you're used to hearing for your religion, your God, your belief. The words you were not allowed to use when you were growing up, things you couldn't talk about in your house, that would have caused a frequency of misunderstanding and a separate.
Today, we've talked about it so many times because we work.
There's a word that's misunderstood.
Yep.
And used in households as a different term. They'll use different terms for it. Don't talk about it only. So it's not thought of as a power of Babel. We found for years it wasn't to scale. We work in it, and people tend to very much misunderstand and think that human trafficking is limited to sex trafficking or sex abuse only. or that it's limited to a certain group of people. The language barrier. Yes, and it's not just the kid paid because they're not from here. That's human trafficking, not being paid according to your work, based on some other definition. Human trafficking, but the language barrier, the frequency of misunderstanding, causes everyone to think it's very limited or one thing.
Which causes closed-mindedness.
That causes closed-mindedness, and it also causes a large barrier in those of us that work to end human trafficking. It causes people to think that we should only be working in one field, or that we don't have the authority, or we don't have any business talking to someone in CPS if we specialize in the children in tunnels. Or how would we know we only work in elite sex trafficking? That language barrier that keeps all of those forms of trafficking in one individual boxes separate from each other's mind. Those language barriers cause people to grow up and believe that the words that they heard are the only correct words. And it causes people to turn away from each other. We deal with the definite
Could be because that's what that is.
I grew up under MK Aldrich. One of the main programs is to specific words. You haven't heard that you've now learned ritual to describe the abuse. Get help once from a social worker at school, but I wasn't able to tell her that I was being raped and tortured. I was only able to say that's a real thing. So how was I supposed to tell people I needed help for a satanic ritual? I couldn't.
They couldn't understand the language you were using.
And all I could describe was my baptism. That was part of the MK Ultra programming. And until it was broken, I was unable to say, it just simply was not there. That's a big problem for a lot of people. During spiritual awakening, you have another frequency of misunderstanding. The misunderstanding comes from there isn't language to describe what some of us are going through.
And in the spiritual community, there's a lot of people that are explaining the same thing, but they use a different word for it.
Yes.
Like how everyone uses a different word for God, or Creator, or Krishna, or Buddha, or, you know.
Yes.
It's the same as that.
Yes. Some people talk about chakras, and other people are talking on a science level about energy places in the body, when they're both talking about the same thing. But the language difference causes those people to think they're not talking about the same thing. That's a big thing in the spiritual wake-up community. Yeah. There's experiences, but there's a giant gap in between them because of that Tower of Babel. Yeah. Man, it causes gaps in communication, disconnection. You know, it can cause bad attitudes and behaviors that people don't understand. You respond to someone totally different. They say something and you think they mean something else. Absolutely.
Especially with text message.
Communication via text. That's like a one all by itself. That's true. Because you can't express emotion or intention or how you're feeling, not real well, through a text message.
No.
So half the time they come across dry or factual when you're trying to be humorous, or they'll come across funny when you're pissed off. I try to use emojis 24/7 to try to express whether I'm serious or I'm happy, because we've experienced that one a lot. People get hurt feelings. Yeah, that's a huge one. That coding. Yeah, the older generation of people.
And some people use the pictures
Yeah.
as a code for something else. And
That the whole time. Standing a giant gap in generations caused by the different use of different languages. Texting is a language. Goes on YouTube. All of the social are grown up in a different social platforms. It's right there.
Good book.
They're not together. And then how are you going to learn the languages between them? You're not. That's what happens. Causes disconnection. People can't get together. They can't learn each other's language. If they're not around each other, they're not going to learn each other's language. The older generation can't teach the youngsters and talk to someone long enough for them to understand, oh, that's what it looked like for me today. I call it this. You know, and then bridge that gap and allow the younger generation to speak to the older generation and say, yeah, we call it this now. And bring those two pieces of language together. Yeah, maybe they don't want us to. They think we're trying to build another Tower of Babel. if we get all the languages together, there wouldn't be any more coding. Everyone would understand you. Story without proof. Yeah. Back to that language of human trafficking divide. When you're a survivor of human trafficking,
Sure seems to be a lot of requirements, apparently.
seem to be lots.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be a survivor of human trafficking and tell your story anymore. You're not allowed to get help for yourself, seems, without the burden of proof. And that little language of misunderstanding and the gap in understanding causes there to be no sufficient proof. We deal with that. I want to talk about that today. Where I came from, I was under MK Ultra from birth. Spoke to me for several years outside of a specific type of language. They didn't use regular everyday terms to describe the things they were doing. They didn't call rituals satanic rituals. They called them ceremony or work. They didn't call them rituals, so I didn't have that language. No one said the word ritual around me ever. It was not allowed. That was part of the program. This is something else they didn't say. I want to come up with a bunch of examples because it makes it easier. The baptism one. Day and night, yeah. They called night dark. They didn't say the word night. They said dark, in the dark. And daytime was just the light, just day. There was no word for time. They didn't use the word time with me for years. Or hours, minutes, so 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, I didn't hear those words. They didn't want me to understand what time it was or get a sense of it. So those little examples might sound weird, but that's MK Ultra. And when I came out, and I ran away when I was 15, trying to get help for myself for the next several years, when I would describe what I was trying to get help for, I sounded coded as hell. I sounded like I didn't know what I was talking about. And I was only able to describe them visually instead of using the right words. That's what I did for many years, to try to get people to understand what I was saying, until that MK Ultra was lifted. That causes the coding. That made it where when I tried to first come out and tell my story, it had to be very limited. I didn't tell every detail of my story, and it didn't work as proof. People wanted proof. How do I give the example without telling my story? I probably can't.
Well, you told your story, and then people kept asking for proof. And then we gave proof, and then they say it's fake.
Yeah.
They don't believe it, and then it's just, they tear you down and tear you down.
I'll give the example. I told my story on TikTok, and I said I was born in the elite sex trafficking industry. Pardon me. That I was sold to the Pope, and I never said sold. I said I met the Pope one day, and I said the word met him that day because no one charged him money for me. I was a gift. I was given to him, and there was no money exchanged, so I didn't want to be inaccurate. I met the Pope that day, and I was abused by him. A short story. I was born in the human trafficking industry. I met the Pope, and I was sold to John Walsh that day. And they demanded instant proof. I provided videos and photos to enough people I should not have to provide to the world. Those people then turned around and said, "That's not you in the photo." How are you supposed to respond to that? I'm not sure what the
when
proper
you're looking
response.
At something that
Yeah,
you know is you, and
when you're
like,
showing,
that's not you.
yeah, you're showing a photo of yourself, and then the world says that isn't you. So then we provide eyewitnesses. We had many eyewitnesses. Real either.
I'm not sure how.
Yeah, we didn't know those people. I didn't know them. They came forward and found me. But we faked it. Then we provided newspaper articles. They said those were faked and stolen off of Google. Yeah, and I was able to say more things clearly. I was more comfortable. And I said that I had been sold to John Walsh that day. And then I added later that he was my father on my birth certificate. People claimed I was a liar because I didn't say it the first time I told the story.
There was a lot of confusion that happened in miscommunication
That's the frequency of misunderstanding.
because none of them even asked a question.
No.
They're
And
just
because people
accused.
don't understand that if you add more details to a story, it doesn't change the facts of the story. It gives more details and more depth hundreds of times. That's that frequency of
shouldn't.
misunderstanding. And you see how picking apart someone's story like that can cause it all to be confusing and not make sense anyway? You start to lose track of what you're even talking about. That's why I wanted to tell it in that weird, choppy sort of way. That's the frequency of misunderstanding. Human trafficking survivors come forward. When we rescue people, we see it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to tell others what have happened. And they usually tell us right away, please don't tell anyone. And we don't. It's confidential. But in their time, when a survivor comes forward and they want to tell people what has happened to them, they may not be comfortable telling every detail of their life to everyone in the world. So they might come forward and tell a small part of their story first and see where the comfort level is for them. Let it sit for a while and see if they're okay with having said those words out loud. And then later, with time, if they become a little bit more comfortable, they might tell us their life story. These are people's lives. There's probably a lot of details in people's lives that we're not aware of. We don't need every single detail to support and their experience.
Because it doesn't matter. None is greater or less
Right.
important.
And how would I know if their language that they're using to describe their experiences are the language I would use to describe that experience? I don't want to fall back into that language understanding. Not that one. Causes to yourself. Look, it caused a little pause. Thank you. Brittany helps. Part of the thing. All right. Frequency warfare stuff. Frequency attacks. Negative frequencies can cause damage to your body. They cause physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, depression, without a medical or ADHD, things like drugs. They have symptoms. They have pain. They cause to our human bodies by this stuff. That causes stress, causes physical ailments, mental ailments, psychological symptoms. The attacks,
Social anxiety.
social
possibly.
anxiety, causes divide. It causes everyone else to think that survivors are less, broken, damaged, somehow less. And that's not true. That doesn't help healing. Healing is to be whole. To stop that, it takes radical acceptance, understanding, and getting around this frequency of misunderstanding. Getting around the device to describe things. Not having words to help someone understand. Ask questions. There's a language. Ask questions. And everyone else with the, I want proof. And then the proof never being good enough. Each document being fake, or here's another piece of proof, and someone not accepting that over and over. I think that is directly because of this language of misunderstanding, this frequency of misunderstanding. It loops back around. You start out being limited on what you understand, programming, whatever the issue is that's causing limited the whole time, keeping the division going. And then maybe they come across people telling their story about surviving, and they can't seem to understand that something like that exists in their world. So they can't seem to understand that that person can be telling the truth. And they can't figure out a way to bridge that divide and reach them and see what's going on or care. It causes that barrier. It just doesn't end.
Unless you ask some questions.
Yeah.
What's going on up there?
Yeah. And that limitation on what we all understand, I think that leads to everybody closing their eyes and closing their mind, refusing to look at something, basing their judgments and opinions on only that stuff that talk to people, communicate. How do you bridge the divide?
Not just talk to people, but talk to people about them, get to know them.
Yeah.
Not just talk at them about you and yourself.
With the intent of understanding instead of the intent of a response. Talk to people about themselves and then be ready to hear what they're going to say, how it ought to be.
Yeah, because if every response to what someone's telling you about themselves is, oh, that can't be true. Oh, no, I don't believe you. Oh, no, that's not true. But
That's not communication. Maybe talk to people and try to understand what they're telling you. Maybe, yeah. Just keep asking questions. Try again. Maybe eventually we can get past that barrier and build a new tower of people that know how to speak to each other. Yeah. That's how we'd shut down the frequency warfare.
acceptance.
And victim of human trafficking. If they don't feel comfortable enough to tell you the worst parts of their life, if they aren't comfortable to share what happened to them and know that they're not going to receive massive judgment because they don't have an adequate, sufficient piece of proof that makes you happy, you're not going to heal them because you can't bridge that gap of misunderstanding. Give a crap about the documentation they should or shouldn't have. If all you're concerned with is the proof, you've kind of missed the person. That'd be step one in fixing all this. Look past the non-living items. Start looking at the things absorbing your freak. That would work, right? All right. I think we're good. We don't misunderstand each other. She didn't think I was coded. She understood I was saying words.
There was
She asked
a lot
questions.
of things I didn't understand, but I got to understand.
Just keep.
It shouldn't.
I would rather leave that